Module 4. Lesson 3. PHP and Relational Databases. Most of backend web applications need to communicate with a database where the data are stored. With PHP, you can easily connect to any DB, query for and manipulate its data. MySQL is the most popular database system used with PHP. DBs is covered in other module, so you need to have studied it carefully before you continue. In this section we will illustrate with a simple but indicative application, how you can work with PHP and relational databases. PHP files can contain some special commands to connect with a DB server and send requests to push or get data. PHP can work with a MySQL database by using either the MySQLi extension or the PHP data objects. MySQLi can be used with two different programming styles, object-oriented or procedural. PDO will work on 12 different DB systems, whereas MySQLi will only work with MySQL databases. However, MySQLi is easier for beginners and most popular when working with MySQL. We recommend using MySQLi with object-oriented programming style. I will illustrate how you can work with PHP and MySQL by demonstrating the development of a simple but indicative application. In this demo application we will store and manipulate data about our friends. In Appendix of Module 4 textbook, you can find the source code of 2 PHP files that you will need to set your application and we explain in this presentation. Under the XAMPP folder htdocs create a new folder with name friends, and under this folder copy these 2 PHP files. Run XAMPP control panel and start Apache and MySQL servers. The first step when we want to work with DBs, is to connect to the database server. In our case the XAMPP MySQL server. Set IP address or domain name of the server, the username and password to access the server and a DB name. Connect with the DB server and check the connection. If there is any problem, for example wrong password or server is not running, a message is printed, and the program ends. For simplicity reasons, we used user root with no password. If you wanted to change the user into a password, please edit the 2 PHP files in these lines. On successful connection, we can send and execute SQL statements to the DB server. First we build SQL statements as strings, and then execute them on the DB server. Note that we always have to check if the statement produced any error during execution, and post an error message to the user. In line 23 we build an SQL statement for the creation of database myFriends. In line 25, SQL statement is executed on the DB server. If successful, the database myFriends should be created. In lines 32 to 35, we build the SQL statement for the creation of table friend under myFriends database, and stored as a string. In line 37, we execute it and if successful, the table friend should be created. The connection with the DB server will be closed automatically when the script ends. However, it is a good practice to do it in code, as we show in line 43. The structure of table friend that we just created, is shown in this screenshot. It has 8 fields and an ID. First name, last name and a valid email. A flag if it is a close friend. The gender, F for females or M for males, the birth date, the favorite color and optionally some comments. Note some constraints of these fields, that we will use for data validation in PHP. The PHP superglobals _get and _post associative arrays are used in PHP to collect form data. We recommend using _request array, which is also a PHP superglobal variable that includes both get and post arrays. This is a simple and easy way for PHP to either collect data from an HTML form, or pass parameters to PHP files through the URL. Write this code in a PHP file with the name, URL parameters test.php. Save it under htdocs folder, and access it through your web server by typing this URL. This example shows how we can pass parameters to PHP files through the URL. The name of the two parameters are var1 and var2. Now let's look at an example that shows a simple form with an input field and a submit button. Write this code in a PHP file with the name, formtest.php. Save it under htdocs folder, and access it through your web browser. When a user submits the data by clicking on the button Send It, the form data is sent to the file specified in the action attribute of the form tag. In this example, we point back to itself, formtest.php. The isSet function checks whether a variable is set, which means that it has to exist in the URL and is not null. So, when there isn't URL parameters, only the form is appeared. When the user fills out the form and clicks the Submit button, the form data is sent for processing with the HTTP GET method, as URL parameters. Now the variable _request_send isn't null, and the PHP scripts access the form value by using the variable _request_fname. The same result could also be achieved using the HTTP POST method. Information sent from a form with the GET method is visible to everyone. All variable names and values are displayed in the URL, as you can see in the second screenshot. GET also has limits on the amount of information to send. The limitation is about 2,000 characters. However, because the variables are displayed in the URL, it is possible to bookmark the page, which can be useful in some cases. GET is faster and may be used for sending non-sensitive data. POST is more secure and should be used for sending passwords or other sensitive information. In the rest of this presentation, I will explain a simple application in order to demonstrate how to manipulate a database with PHP code. This is a very simple example with a DB with only one table. However, it demonstrates how to read, insert, update or delete data from a DB table, and it could be used as a base to create more complex code to manipulate databases with many tables. We chose to have only one PHP file, friends.php, that can be used for all different functionalities. This is usually a good practice when all functionalities deal with only one table. However, the developer could create one PHP script for any single functionality. When we have a multi-purpose PHP file, we use URL parameters to distinct the various functionalities. The default functionality of this PHP script, when no parameter is there, is to show a table of the current friends, or a message if it is empty. Moreover, it shows a link to friends.php !add, which causes the functionality for adding a new friend. I am going to explain the part of code that it is executed during this functionality. In lines 177 to 193, you can see the HTML code for the head that it will be common for all functionalities. This code includes some CSS code for styling the error and successful messages, the tables and the headings of pages. In lines 195 to 205, we set the parameters and connect to the XAMPP DB server of MySQL. Note that you may have to change the values of the parameters before you run the code. In line 283, SQL statement for the selection of all friends in DB is stored into a string. In line 286, this statement is executed on DB server and store the results in a two-dimensional array named $result. At the moment, the DB table is empty, so the PHP script in line 293 just prints, "No friends currently in database." In line 334, we print a link to the same PHP script, friends.php, but with the URL parameter add. The function HTML special chars is used whenever we print the variable server PHP self, for security reasons, in order to protect against hacker attacks. Finally, we close the connection with DB server, and the HTML file that PHP scripts produces, before sending it to the user browser. When add appears in the URL as a parameter, the PHP script shows to user a table, with all the suitable HTML form fields in order to give the data for a new friend. Let's go through the code and explain it. The condition in line 218 is true, as the add parameter exists on the URL. So the script calls the print form function. This function, see lines 12 to 81, prints the HTML code for the form. Each form element corresponds to one field in DB table friend. Regarding the data type of the corresponding field, we use the more suitable HTML form element. We use text type for simple strings like first name and last name, email type for emails and checkbox type for Boolean values like close friend. Moreover, we use date type for birth date, radio type or select tag for multiple choices and text area tag for free text. All global variables are set to empty strings or 0, so none of the embedded PHP code will produce any output. They will be used for the update functionality. Finally, note that the button name will be add button, as the act parameter of the function is equal to add. But what we will do with the data sent to us? Think security when processing PHP forms. Proper validation of form data is important to protect your form from hackers, spammers or just invalid data. That's why we declared in line 3 some global variables like first name error. These variables will hold error messages for the corresponding fields. Let's assume that we just press the Add Friend button, without filling anything. In line 222, the condition is true, as the Add button parameter exists. It is the name of the form submit button. Thus, in line 223 we call the function check form values. In lines 93 to 98 we reset all global variables to empty strings or 0, in order to fill them with the right values, after validating the form fields. For instance, the email variable will hold the valid email field in the form. If the email is not valid, then the variable email error will hold a suitable error message that will be printed next to the form field. In line 99 we declare the variable valid form values and initially set it as true. It will turn to false if there is any invalid data in the form. In line 112, the test input function is called for the string that is written inside form element first name. In lines 85 to 90 you can see the code of function test input. This is a custom function that does 3 things. Use the trim PHP function to strip unnecessary characters from the user input data, like extra space, tab or new line. Removes backslashes from the user input data, by using the PHP strip slashes function. And finally, passes user input data through PHP HTML special chars function for security reasons. It converts special characters to HTML entities. Now the data from firstname field is safe to be stored in global variable $firstname. If the firstname field is empty, then an error message for this field is prepared, and the flag valid form values turns to false, in line 115. In lines 118 to 128, we have the same validation code for the last name and email field. Especially, for email, we must validate that it has a valid email format. The easiest and safest way to check whether an email address is well formed is to use PHP filter var function, as you see in line 125. In lines 130 to 136 we check the gender field. The PHP function empty returns false if the variable exists and is not empty, otherwise it returns true. If none of the 2 radio buttons were checked, an error message for this field is stored to the gender error variable, and the flag valid form values turns to false. In lines 138 to 142 we check for the close friend field. If the checkbox is checked, the variable close friend is set to 1, otherwise is set to 0. Note that there is no invalid input possible here. In lines 144 to 162 we check for birthdate. There are 4 different checks and corresponding messages for this field. Birthdate is required when field is empty. Invalidate format, if an invalid date is given, like 32 of October. Birthdate cannot be before 1900. Birthdate cannot be in the future. In order to understand the code, please study the PHP functions, check date, and explode. In lines 164 to 169, we check for the favorite color field. The function empty returns false if user selects no color. An error message for this field is stored in fav color error variable, and the flag valid form values turns to false. For comments field there are no invalid values, as it is optional. Thus in line 171, we just copy its value to the global PHP variable $comments. In line 173, the flag valid form values variable is returned. If any field is invalid it will return false, otherwise true, and some global variables will have the valid values to be inserted in the DB, while all error messages will be empty. However, in this case, the flag is false, so from line 223 we go to line 234, where the print form function is called, that shows the same form, filled with the values of user and with some error messages as well. Now, let's take the case we fill the form with valid data and press the button Add Friend. In line 222, the condition is true, as the Add button parameter exists in URL. In line 223, the function checkFormValues returns true, because all values are valid, and has set all global variables to the correct values to be inserted into the database. In lines 225 and 226 we prepare the SQL insert statement, by using the global variables that carry the valid values from the form. In line 228 we execute this SQL statement in the MySQL server. If successful, we output in green color the message, "New friend added successfully." In line 283 we build the SQL statement for the selection of all friends in DB. In line 286, we execute the SQL statement and store the results in a two-dimensional array named $result. In line 292, the condition is true, as there is one friend in the DB. So the PHP script prints him in an HTML table. In lines 298 to 309, we print the table headers for the fields first name, last name, birthdate, gender and fave color. They are printed as links to PHP script itself with URL parameter order by. By pressing any of these links user can see the friends sorted by the selected field. In lines 311, the function fetchASOC fetches a result row as an associative array. The while loop loops through all the result array, which at the moment has only one row. In line 312, we copy the friend ID to a global variable, in order to use it into the links at the last cell of the row. In lines 313 to 317, if the friend is a close friend then we put orange background to the row. In line 318, we output the first name, last name and email of the friend in different table cells. In lines 320 to 324, we calculate the age of the friend and show it among her birthdate in the next table cell. In line 325, we output the gender, fave color and comments of the friend in different table cells. In lines 327 and 328, we print two links in the last cell of the row, delete and edit. These are links to the PHP script with URL parameter delete ID and edit ID correspondingly. By pressing these links, users can either delete a friend or update their data. Insert some of your friends into the DB and follow the default link again. Press the link birthdate on the head of the table. The friends now are shown ordered by their birthdate, eldest first. Let's press the link last name. Now, our friends are shown ordered alphabetically, according to their last name. The other links on the heading line work the same way. In line 284 and 285, when there is a URL parameter order by, for example order by equals last name, then the SQL select statement is modified as, select all from friend, order by last name, and the results in line 286, are returned from the DB server ordered by the required field. Press the link Edit next to John Smith. The form is displayed filled with the values of John Smith, but ready to be updated. Change his email, and press the button Update Friend. In line 264, this condition is true, as the edit ID parameter exists on the URL. In line 266, we build the SQL statement for the selection of the friend with the specified ID in the URL, in our case the one. In lines 267 to 268 we fetch the values of this friend and store them in the $row associative array. In lines 271 to 279, we copy friend properties from row array to global variables, and then, in line 280, we call the print form function with update as parameter. This causes the print of the form, filled with the values of the selected friend. See lines 12 to 81 of the code. The button name will be Update Button. In line 238, the condition is true, as the Update Button parameter exists. In line 240, we call the function, checkFormValues. The function returns true, because all values are valid, and has set all global variables to the correct values to be inserted into the DB, including the modified email. In lines 241 and 242, we prepare the SQL update statement, by using the global variables. In line 243 we execute the SQL update statement. If successful, then outputs in green color the message, "Your friend updated successfully." Afterwards, the PHP script fetches all friends and show them in a table. Note the modified email of John Smith. Press the link Delete next to Bill Gates. A message is displayed, that our friend deleted successfully, and the table of our friends is displayed, without Bill Gates. In line 253, the condition is true, as the delete ID parameter exists. Its value is the ID of the friend to delete. In line 255, we prepare the SQL delete statement. In line 257, we execute the SQL delete statement in DB server. If successful, then we output in green color the message, "Your friend deleted successfully." Afterwards, the PHP script fetches all friends and show them in a table. Note that Bill Gates is not there. This was a brief introduction to how you can work with PHP and relational databases. Please, study the code in the appendix of your textbook, and try to code a similar application of your own. Remember, coding can be fun.